Hi, my name's Jamie. I'm about 75% of the way through my graduate program at American University's School of International Service, and I thought I'd share a few thoughts with you about the difference I found in managing how I get through graduate school and the difference it was through undergraduate school. And the biggest difference is information overload. In undergraduate school, you had textbooks and you took some notes and you wrote a few short papers. But in graduate school, especially in my program, which is heavy on paper, writing papers, um, I read a ton of journal articles. The information just that's thrown at you in class is it's a lot. And the biggest trick they always tell you is organization, but how do you do that? So I thought I'd talk to you today about the four different workflows that I have in place that help me manage this. The four areas basically are information management, where you collect the information, you intake it, and how you organize it. The next one is information processing, where I have a workflow set up that helps me know how I'm going to read, annotate, and maintain or keep where I keep those notes. The third one is kind of how I synthesize the information. Becomes especially relevant with research papers where you need to take journal articles and books that you might have read and piece them together to come up with something new. And then the last one is project management, which is not new. You probably knew that that was coming, to-do lists and calendars and all that jazz. Anyway, I thought I'd give you an overview of how I do these things and the applications I use to help you get ready for your upcoming semester. Now, the first workflow I wanted to talk to you about is information management. Information collection isn't so hard, right? You download an article, you download whatever you have, you web clip something. It's what you do with it when it's on your computer, right? You don't want to just dump it all over your desktop, and don't print anything unless you absolutely have to. I would recommend against printing. You're going to have papers everywhere. Anyway, let me show you what to do instead. Now, normally you would put it in a file, right? Here's all the documents I have for one class. Different articles, different internet articles. So these things are hard to keep track of. There's a lot going on in each one. So what normal people do is they title it something that will help jog their memory and what it's in it so that they can remember later, oh, I wanted to go look in that article. What you end up doing is opening and closing the documents all the time and searching with, using the Control F to find something inside it, because you can't search across within the content across articles. You can only search at the top level across titles. So this is what I would recommend. For Mac users, I hope you have something. If you're a Windows user, I hope there's something similar. I honestly don't know. But for Mac users, I use DevonThink, and it is a paid application, but it is something that I highly recommend you invest in. I have the $200 Pro version because it does things like OCR my documents so that I can search across them. Sometimes you download a journal article and it's old and it's not OCR'd before, so you can't search within the document itself. So you really want something that can OCR everything. Now, previously I showed you this file, right? This is whoops, I guess I closed it. What the file looks like. Instead, I've got this, where I've got a database for my graduate studies. These are the different classes I've taken. And these are the articles I've collected for my Causes of War class that I took a couple years ago. Let me close that out so you can see them. So these are all the different articles. I can search not only across the titles, but I can search within a document. So if I go here, I can search across the document, but I can also search across all the documents. Conflicts. So see, it's searching not only, I can search with just in the articles that I have for that class, but I can also search across the database. So anything that I've had in a different class, I might find a unique connection to something I've taken in another class, especially in graduate school, as the classes all seem, obviously covering the same topic from different angles. So you're going to be able to use information across classes, and this will allow you to do it. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you was when you're writing a paper. So when you write a paper, you have to do, um, let me find a good one. This was a long paper I wrote. Okay, so you're going to have to include citations, right? Citations are labor intensive. Even if you're okay with writing the author, the date, and the page yourself, the last thing you should be doing is writing a bibliography page ever again. If you're writing bibliography pages and typing this information out, you're doing it wrong. You need to get a reference manager. There's free ones like Mendeley that work well with Word. There are other reference managers that work with uh, like a Mac Pages or Google Docs. Not exactly sure which ones work with Google Docs, but you're going to want to find a reference manager that is interoperable with the word processor that you're working. And this is what it looks like. I'm currently using Bookends. And what happens is when you import your documents into the reference manager, you sometimes it'll fill this information in for you, the author, the title, the journal, and then it formats the reference totally. So when you're finished with your document, and with Bookends you scan it, but once you're done scanning it, it will automatically create the bibliography page. You never have to type this again. So get a reference manager. If you type another reference manager, you're doing it wrong. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is automation. Now, a lot of people try to ignore this when it comes to the capabilities of your Mac. It's called, think of it as the utilities, right? So when you download an article, you drag and drop. If it's old, you move it into the trash. You can set up your computer so that you're not doing any of that. For instance, I've got Hazel. Let me show you what that looks like. Now, Hazel runs in the background of my computer, and it's a utility that just runs rules, right? The cool thing is so when I download a journal I can't speak today, a journal article for my class or research here. So I've downloaded an article for research and I tag it research as I'm saving it. Um, oh, this thing takes forever to open sometimes. You set up a rule so that when it senses that something has been added to my desktop with the rule, with the tag research, it automatically sends it to to where I need it to go. So I just hit save, and the next thing I know, when I go into DevonThink, it's there. I don't have to worry about it. It also sends it to my reference manager, so the citation is there the next time I'm in it. So I didn't have to do anything. It also cleans out my trash can. I mean, go look and see the capabilities of Hazel. I believe I have the free version. I'm not sure if there's a paid version, but it can do a lot of stuff for you. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Alfred, which is a launcher. So I hit hotkeys and this pops up. I can launch apps this way. I can find folders this way. I can launch bookmarks. It's my library. You can do simple math, like the capability, it's got a lot of capabilities. Now I have the free version. There is a paid version that does even more. So if you're really interested in automation, you can take this to super big heights into keyboard only type stuff. I do recommend at least looking into Hazel and Alfred. It makes things faster on your laptop. And it just cuts down on the amount of time you spend doing the organizing. It just shows up where you need it. So that's kind of information management. Let's move on to the next workflow. Now, the next workflow you need to keep in mind and kind of work through is what applications you're going to use to process the information. I call this information processing. You're going to need to know how you're going to approach highlighting, taking notes, and just generally what you're going to do with this information, right? When I first started graduate school, I was printing off these journal articles. I was using a normal highlighter, and I was taking notes in this amazing, beautiful notebook, and I loved this. This was so satisfying. The problem is this is now almost worthless to me because I can't search it. It's not readily available. I'd have to go pull it off the shelf and flip through it to find whatever I need. So after 2 classes of doing this, I decided to go digital. So now let me show you a few of the applications that I use to process information, but just keep in mind the concepts of what I'm doing so you can find the application that works best for you. Unfortunately, I'm also still on a Mac. I use an iPad, so this I can't recommend too many things for Windows users, so hopefully you guys have something similar. Now, you've taken my advice and not printed these journal articles off. So what my first recommendation is if you have DevonThink, the easiest way to read a journal article is to annotate it and highlight it using DevonThink. It has its own um, uh, annotation tools. You can highlight, and the great thing is with DevonThink is I showed you this search feature here, but when you're highlighting and annotating in DevonThink, it actually also keeps track of your annotations. So I can see and jump around the different annotations I've made. You can also, so for this one, I was like, wait a minute, I think that's really important. So I actually made a note. I can write it there and it saves it. It's right there. So you can take notes and annotate in the same document. Um, DevonThink also lets you, let me get out of there, summarize your highlights. So it'll actually export all your highlights as a single document with links back to this document. So it has so much potential. The $200 in this application is so worth it. So that's how I personally handle journal articles. You can also use things like Adobe Acrobat. I think they have um, application that you can annotate on your Mac. There's also, I think, Skim, which works well with um, DevonThink. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones, but I like to use DevonThink. Now, when I'm like reading a physical book, sometimes you have to get a physical book. That's the only thing that you can do. I like to take handwritten notes, but I do that on my iPad because, again, I always want to get things into DevonThink. Now, you could also probably do this if you handwrite them on paper, then scan it in. The problem is, one of the reasons I like this program is because I can convert it to text. So I like to use Notes Plus on my iPad. And I don't know how to show you what's going on my iPad, so these are screenshots. So I like to use Notes Plus. I don't know if I should recommend it because it's got some serious problems, but some of the things I like about it is I really like the pens. It's like got this calligraphy pen. Everything looks pretty. It makes me feel better while I'm taking notes. And then the key for me is that you can convert it to text. So I converted this to text. And then when I export it as a PDF and import it into DevonThink, then it's searchable. It's just as searchable as my annotated notes from DevonThink. Now, let's say that I want to go to the coffee shop and annotate my journal articles, but I don't want to bring my laptop. So DevonThink also has a mobile app. And you'd think this is not sponsored by DevonThink. I kind of wish it was, but they have a mobile app, and if you pay, I think it's an extra $10 to get um, the upgraded version, you can actually have annotation tools on here too, and so it all syncs, and you can annotate just on your iPad. So that's something I like to do. Sometimes if I have a book that I'm able to get electronically, I'll do it through Kindle. You can highlight and annotate directly in the Kindle, and then you can, as long as you haven't highlighted too much, you can actually export those into, like download them and put them into a document, and also put that into DevonThink. So everything is all in one place. So now you've annotated. What were you actually looking for when you're reading these articles, right? Like these are intense articles. Let me show you. So going back to Scott. Now, why did I highlight this stuff? What about this information made it important, right? These are anywhere between 22 to 35 pages long, and it can get intimidating, especially early on when you first start reading I keep saying that, journal articles, to kind of understand what you're looking for. So when the last couple semesters, I kind of finally realized how I want to go about this. So every time I read a journal article, I try to answer 4 questions. The first two have to do with keeping in mind the context of the paper, and the last two have to do with what I'm getting out of it. So the first question is, what question or problem is the author trying to answer? And that isn't necessarily always obvious, but it's really important to understand where they're coming from and why they feel this is important, because that reflects on their conclusion. Did they actually answer the question? Did they answer it sufficiently? These are type of things you need to understand so that when you're moving down to the third question, what do I think of how they framed the issue and how they answered it? This is the type of processing that will prepare you to talk about this article in class. Now, if I was doing this for a research paper, I would often change this question to, how would this paper answer my research question? And that one's can be a little difficult to answer, but you really need to answer it so that you're using the article responsibly in your own research. And then the last question, what other things did I find particularly interesting or useful? And this is helpful um, to really identify, those things that you could use in your research paper, the quotes that you like, and just the little nits and things that are interesting. Now, the reason I would say, well, let me go back. You need to think about these things when you're annotating and highlighting, but at the end of that, you really need to write out the answers. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be a lot, but a lot of times when you finish an article, you think, yeah, I get it, that makes sense. But then you get to class and you're trying to verbalize it, and you're like, well, something is tripping me up here. Or you do something like I do a lot and make yourself sound like an idiot. So, which is okay, it happens. But if you write these out, it actually helps you realize where you're being tripped up. Now, it doesn't have to be long, as I said. I just usually open up a new note and write them out, real short and sweet. I always put the citation up there, copied it out of my citation manager, just because sometimes things get confused and filed in the wrong place, and you have the same author for different articles. This kind of helps keep it straight. But you also notice that I answered these questions out of order in this. At least I have them in the wrong order, and that's because I was using this article for a research paper. So as I was actively using this, I wanted what I needed up top, and then kept the context down below, so I could be reminded of it, but it's not, in the way all the time. So you can do this however you want. Come up with your own questions, answer them in the same different order. The reason I have them in this order is because oftentimes the first two questions can be answered, sometimes ideally, in the abstract itself, where they say this is the problem, this is the summary of what I discovered. So that's why I have it in this order. But um, use it however you will, make it whatever you want. So now you have these, one pagers on the different articles you're either preparing for class or you're doing your research on. The next step is synthesizing it. It's making connections, it's seeing the similarities and the differences between the author's perspectives. And this requires more brain power, right? This requires you to think analytically about how these things all fit together. Now, these 4 questions get you ready to do that, and that's why I find them very important. The first time I was developing this method for myself, I got really annoyed with trying to remind myself just by reviewing just the highlights what the paper was about. So the first time I did this, I did a number spreadsheet. I basically, I put the author, the title, the year, the question, the answer, and then what I got out of it. I hadn't even verbalized what my questions were that I was trying to answer. But by putting it in a spreadsheet, I was able to see, um, so I think I have some of these filtered, but like for week 6, I could see, okay, these were the articles I had that week, and I could easily see the differences between them. And when I was in class, it was all there ready for me. So since I'm doing an online program, I could have this up on my screen so that it was easy to refer to, right? Kind of like a cheat sheet. Now, this is fabulous for when you don't have a lot of to review, right? Like for week 6, I had 3 articles. So for most of the time, in class, you don't need to do a whole lot. Just have your, 4 questions answered for each one. You can refer to it. And that's pretty much all you need to do. You can in your head be like, okay, well, I noticed that that was a difference from there. You don't need to do anything further. You don't necessarily need any other applications. Now, when you want to take it a step further, so I ended up taking it a step further when I had my big practicum capstone project to do. And I found it difficult to make those connections, right? Like in DevonThink, I can see the articles, but I fiddle with labels, I fiddle with tags, but the fact of the matter is it ends up just being a list. I couldn't figure out how to think through this. I needed something like a concept manager, not just an information manager. I needed a concept manager. And I first discovered that in Tinderbox. Now, this is an expensive program, so it's not for everybody. I used it for a big project and I actually have a video on how I used it and showing how you can make notes about this. But the thing you need to understand is that, so this is my practicum. This was the outline, okay? So here's my sources. And I did it in this program because I could add metadata, but these are my questions and answers. The idea is that I discovered that different authors approach different concepts differently. So when I noticed that there was a concept that was being addressed across multiple authors, I could make its own note for that, right? So I realized that this author, McCormick, was coming from the perspective of constrained. I'm not going to explain what that means, but I identified him as the constrained perspective. So I wrote a different note just on constrained. Now, whenever an author also came up with constrained, I was able to link that to this same note. So all of a sudden, I started seeing patterns and connections between different authors, right? So that's kind of what you're looking for, is to connect sources of information to concepts. And then once you have the different concepts identified, you reword it in your own words and you've just written your paper. Now, that is helpful for big projects, and you don't need to necessarily do that for everything. But there will come a time when you realize I might want to keep some of this information for later, right? Like I want to get a PhD, or I want to try to just teach at I want to become a teacher of some way. I want to become a writer, and you want to make sure that this information stays usable for the long haul. You want to make sure that you are making those connections across classes and across time. Now, what you might want to consider looking into is building a knowledge database. It's something that, well, there's different approaches to this. You might have heard of the Zettelkasten method. There's building a knowledge database. There's building a second brain. There's the evergreen method. These are different methods for taking notes and making connections. There's actually been just an explosion of note-taking applications geared towards this very idea. And some of them include Roam, Obsidian, and even Notion to a limited extent is usable for this. Now, a lot of people don't recommend Notion for this, but that's where I've decided to start. Because I don't want to use Tinderbox all the time. It's not usable on mobile. I've decided to build a knowledge base in Notion. This is fairly new for me, so there's not a whole lot of notes in here, but I just started. So for instance, in my final practicum paper, I wrote about procedural legislation. It's fascinating topic. I know you think so. And so one of the concepts was the potential procedural influence. And so I wrote a summary of what I learned. Now this is what is I call a durable note. It's something that I can use later on in life. Um, it's it's hard for me to explain this because I'm not proficient at explaining what the evergreen note system is, but that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. So I'll include notes or links in the bottom for you to kind of pursue that. Now, I wouldn't recommend making developing a knowledge database your first priority, right? You need to set up your workflows for information management, keeping organized, how you're going to process the information, and how you're just generally going to make connections just for your classes. That's the immediate need. And one of the things I would recommend doing is, and you can even do this on a piece of paper, right, is writing out your workflows, making sure you understand how you're getting from point A to point B, and then you don't have to think about it later. Now, I did do this in Tinderbox. It's got this cool mapping feature. Oh gosh, sorry, my headphones just made this really loud noise. Um, Mapping feature. Here we go. So my PDF workflow. If I download a PDF, I've already talked through this, but this shows you, this is my action, this step right here. That's what I do. Then Hazel takes over. This is, I know where I need to write a rule for this. Then these are the automated, these are the automated steps, right? Because I have them in a different color. And that helps me know what different steps I need to make sure all the automation rules are established to do. And then I know that these are the steps that I need to make. And I do this for all the different, all the different types of information that I manage. That way I've got the rules working well and I have it in my head how I want to do this. And if I realize if I'm working on something, all of a sudden I keep hitting this point where I'm like, okay, this, it's just not intuitive for me to take this step or to use this application, then you should find a different application or adjust your workflow. And that way, as you're moving through your graduate program, you're going to get really good at this and your workflows are going to adjust. But in the meantime, it's not going to be something that you have to think of all the time. Set it up at the beginning of the semester and then it just works, right? And then you don't have to, spend time every week trying to figure out what you did with last week's articles. So those are, or I guess that's information processing and synthesizing. And the last workflow you really need to set up is your project management. Now, for a lot of us, just a straight up calendar and a to-do list is sufficient. And for my classes, it was, the same thing every week. Read your journal articles, go to class, be able to talk about it, write a paper here and there. To-do list was fine. So you don't necessarily need to get fancy, but you are going to have some projects that are a little bit more intense. When that comes up, really, if you're going to go into a class that is a heavy project, I would look at this stuff early. Now, when I needed to invest in something that was more project management heavy, I ended up turning to Notion to do my senior practicum. Now, Notion is awesome because even if you don't know how to do it, you can actually download other people's templates and just use them, right? You don't have to like build your own database. But I'm not going to share mine because I actually am using the template of a guy named August Bradley, and he has a host of videos that explain not only how to use Notion, but how to use his system. And I'm going to link that below, and it was a lifesaver when I started writing my senior practicum. He's got this way that you can, you know, I split up my practicum into two different projects. Then I had my different tasks. And I mean, gosh, there were a ton of tasks. And you can see everything and log everything. Oh my gosh, Notion was a lifesaver. So if you've got a big project coming up or you think that you need more project management in your life overall, I definitely recommend Notion and I recommend August Bradley. So those are the four main information or processing workflows that you need and I recommend for graduate school. Now, I know that was a lot and it can seem overwhelming, but if you just start getting organized, it's not that bad. I just wanted to thank you for watching my video because I have zero production quality going on here. Clouds are passing by. I'm sure my lighting is changing a lot, but I might do a few more videos if anybody wants something to know something in particular about one of my workflows. I'm thinking about maybe a couple more, but this isn't something I plan on doing a lot. I have 2 classes left. I take 1 class a semester, so 2 more semesters, and then I'll be finished with my program. I wish you all the best in yours, and leave me any comments down below if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.